My new girlfriend manipulated my 14-year-old son into becoming a drug dealer, all while making me look like an unfit, unstable father. But she had no idea I was quietly planning the perfect move that would completely shatter her world and expose everything she tried so hard to hide. Can you imagine losing everything, then finally finding a sliver of hope, only to have it twisted into the most monstrous, unthinkable betrayal? 6 years after my wife died, just gone in an instant, collapsing while making breakfast, I watched my son, my sweet Ethan, convulse with grief, sobbing until he actually vomited. In that shattered moment, I swore I'd protect him, nurture the incredible empathy he possessed. But then she walked in, and everything I thought I knew about my son, about love, about evil, shattered into a million pieces. By the time Ethan was 14, we were inseparable. Weekends were for hiking, movie marathons, and stupid inside jokes only we understood. This kid, man, he was something else. He volunteered at the animal shelter every single Saturday, tutored kids who were struggling, even gave his lunch money away to classmates who needed it more. His teachers raved about his empathy. His coach called him the player who'd help opponents up after tackles. I swear, I'd somehow raised someone infinitely better than myself. Then, at this huge corporate security conference, she just appeared. Marina. She was this cybersecurity executive, all sharp cheekbones and dark, piercing eyes that just seemed to look right through you. And she was brilliant. She laughed at my stupidest jokes, the ones no one else ever got. She'd casually touch my arm when we were talking, lean in close, whispering observations that made me feel like I was the only person in the room. Secret coffee dates quickly turned into dinners while Ethan was at practice. She studied photos of him obsessively, asking detailed questions about his interests, his habits, even his vulnerabilities. It felt intense. After 8 months, I finally introduced them, and they bonded instantly. It was like magic. Marina arrived wearing skateboard brands, quoting underground rappers I'd never heard of, landing perfect kickflips right there in the driveway. She spoke Ethan's language fluently, almost too fluently. Within 6 months, she'd moved in. Initially, life felt absolutely perfect. Late-night kitchen conversations, Marina teaching Ethan card tricks, even some psychological tactics. She'd help him with homework, introducing concepts way beyond his grade level. But then, these subtle changes started to emerge. Ethan abandoned his volunteering. That gentle nature, the kid who rescued injured birds, it just evaporated. He started filming classmates' humiliations for social media. New friends materialized, older kids with these dead eyes and designer clothes, picking him up in luxury cars. The transformation accelerated horrifyingly. More designer clothes appeared. His grades plummeted. Teachers reported cruelty, intimidation. Then the principal called. Ethan was blackmailing a freshman with threatened nude photo leaks, demanding weekly payments. I was sick to my stomach. I implemented strict rules immediately, confiscated his phone, banned those toxic friends. But Marina systematically undermined everything, slipping him cash, returning his devices, inviting banned friends over when I was out. She'd massage my shoulders, whispering about teenage phases, about stifled masculinity. The substance discovery shattered any remaining denial I had. His skateboard felt suspiciously heavy. Inside the hollowed deck, I found pharmaceutical-grade pills, Xanax, Adderall, Percocet, thousands of dollars worth, street value. My 15-year-old son had become a dealer. The confrontation was futile, utterly pointless. Ethan spoke about supply chains, profit margins, market demand. And I heard Marina's words echoing through his explanations. Laws for sheep, wolves making rules. I flushed every single pill. I installed cameras. I mandated weekly substance tests. The principal called constantly. Intimidation escalated to assault. Teachers feared him. Parents started transferring their children to different classes. And then it happened. Sarah, a straight A student, overdosed on pills traced directly to Ethan. 3 days in the ICU, permanent liver damage. That night, I found him counting blood money. Thousands and hundreds, completely unmoved by nearly killing a classmate. A physical confrontation followed. It was the first time I'd ever struck him. He just smiled through the blood, telling me Marina considered me weak, pathetic. Everything his mother would have despised. She was sculpting him into something stronger, teaching him to take rather than ask, to hurt rather than help. I explored every single option. Therapy failed. He manipulated the counselors. Threats of military school dissolved under Marina's influence. She positioned herself as his true parent, the one who understood his potential, while I desperately clung to childish morality. The final catastrophe arrived at 2 a.m. Shouting pierced through my sleep. From my window, I witnessed Ethan and 3 associates surrounding David Kim, the violin prodigy. Baseball bats rose and fell rhythmically. David's screams carried through the empty streets as they methodically broke his ribs, his fingers, his future. I sprinted outside barefoot, tackling Ethan into the asphalt. His knuckles dripped with David's blood, his expression completely vacant. No remorse, no recognition of wrongdoing. Marina had successfully carved out his humanity, leaving something monstrous wearing my son's face. After ensuring David received medical attention and sending Ethan to my mother's, I returned home, strategically. Marina waited in silk negligee, freshly perfumed, positioned for my arrival. She pressed against me, lips finding my neck, pulling me inside with practiced seduction. Her confession came so easily. She spoke about transforming weakness into strength, creating someone worthy of respect through violence and dominance. Every word confirmed her systematic destruction of my child. She'd identified his empathy as weakness, his kindness as vulnerability, requiring correction. I played my part perfectly, pulling her close, kissing her with fabricated passion. My hands tangled in her hair, while the wire taped beneath my shirt captured every damning syllable. She detailed grooming techniques, psychological manipulation tactics, the careful escalation from minor cruelties to substance dealing to assault. The woman I'd loved had deliberately transformed my gentle son into a predator. She'd studied him through photographs, learned his triggers, positioned herself as the parent who understood while painting me as pathetically weak. Every interaction had been calculated, from her perfectly timed arrival to her skateboard tricks to her late-night lessons in power dynamics. She smiled against my mouth, tracing my jaw with manicured nails, completely unaware that her confession was being recorded. Tomorrow, police would receive everything. Tonight, I needed to maintain the charade, gathering evidence while my son sat at his grandmother's, blood still caking his knuckles, perhaps forever lost to Marina's influence. The wire kept recording as she outlined future plans, darker transformations, the complete annihilation of everything good I'd instilled. I held her closer, whispering encouragement, buying time while David Kim lay in intensive care, and my son counted substance money at a distance I might never bridge. Marina's breath warmed my ear as she described her next phase. I maintained my embrace, feeling the wire shift slightly against my chest. Her fingers traced patterns on my shoulder while she explained how Ethan would learn to identify emotional vulnerabilities in wealthy targets at school. She'd already taught him basic reconnaissance through social media stalking. Her cybersecurity job gave her access to corporate employee databases, perfect for identifying which classmates had parents worth targeting. She pulled back to study my face, her dark eyes searching for weakness. I forced myself to stroke her hair, the gesture feeling like broken glass in my throat. Her grip on my wrist tightened painfully, nails digging crescents into my skin, testing me, always testing. I suggested we celebrate her success with wine, needing distance from her scrutiny. In the kitchen, I poured 2 glasses while Marina called grandmother's house on speaker. Ethan answered with mechanical precision, discussing inventory management in coded language. My stomach twisted as I recognized the terminology, product movement, distribution schedules. Through the speaker, grandmother's voice wavered in the background, asking about boxes in her garage. Marina smoothly lied about old camping equipment while I gripped the wine bottle to stop my hands from shaking. Marina scrolled through her phone, showing me innocent-looking youth group photos. She'd been mentoring Jeremy and Marcus, teaching them life skills every Wednesday. I recognized the grooming patterns immediately, the same techniques she'd used on Ethan, isolating vulnerable kids, building trust, introducing concepts gradually. The photos showed her surrounded by admiring teenage boys, their eyes already showing that familiar deadness. I excused myself to the bathroom, locking the door before pulling out my phone. My brother Tom worked nights at the hospital. I typed a coded message about checking on Mom tonight, knowing he'd understand. Marina pounded playfully on the door, asking if I'd fallen in. I flushed the toilet and splashed water on my face before emerging. Back in the bedroom, I found her going through my phone. She looked up with mock innocence, explaining she was just deleting old photos. On the screen, images of young Ethan disappeared, him cradling injured birds, helping at the animal shelter, his face radiating the gentleness she'd systematically destroyed. Each deletion felt like another piece of him being erased. She set the phone aside and pulled me onto the bed, initiating intimacy while continuing her confession. Her hands moved across my chest as she described identifying me as the perfect mark, a widower drowning in guilt about working too much, desperate for connection, pathetically malleable. Her exact words, captured clearly by the wire. She'd studied me like a specimen, learning my weaknesses, crafting her approach, the skateboard tricks, the underground rap knowledge, even her laugh at my terrible jokes. All calculated to infiltrate our lives. My phone buzzed with Tom's response. Marina grabbed it before I could react, reading his confirmation about visiting Mom. Without hesitation, she called grandmother herself. Her voice shifted to concerned girlfriend mode. She told grandmother that Tom was coming by, making sure Ethan handled that thing we discussed. I heard my mother's confused response through the speaker before Marina ended the call. Movement outside caught my attention. Through the bedroom window, I spotted Mrs. Chun walking her ancient poodle at 3 a.m. She paused directly in front of our house, her weathered face tilted up toward our lit window. Even from this distance, I could see her concern. She'd been watching our house more frequently lately, this tiny elderly woman who'd lived next door for 30 years. I suggested checking Ethan's homework, trying to sound like a concerned but clueless father. Marina eagerly grabbed his phone from her nightstand. She had his passwords, of course. She showed me his text messages with pride, pointing out the coded language, tutoring rates that were clearly substance prices, study group meetings that were obviously deals, math homework that was actually customer lists. The evidence sat right there in plain sight, documented in his own messages. Marina's phone vibrated with an incoming video. She opened it without hesitation, angling the screen so I could see. Ethan stood in grandmother's living room, teaching her how to count money with UV lights. My mother's hands shook as she handled the bills, her voice weak as she protested that this wasn't right. Ethan's response was patient but firm, explaining she needed to learn the family business. Marina smiled at the screen like a proud parent watching their child's first steps. The next morning arrived too quickly. I drove to grandmother's house alone, Marina staying behind to rest. The familiar ranch home looked unchanged from outside, but inside, Ethan had transformed the sewing room. UV lights lined the walls. Money-counting machines sat on grandmother's antique desk. Stacks of bills organized by denomination covered every surface. My mother stood in the kitchen making Ethan breakfast, her hands trembling as she flipped pancakes. She pulled me into the garden, glancing nervously toward the house. Her whispered words confirmed my worst fears. Ethan had discovered her heart medication dependency, the pills she'd hidden for years out of shame. He threatened to tell everyone at her church, her book club, her volunteer groups. The humiliation would kill her faster than any heart condition, so she cooperated, letting him use her home, her garage, her respectability as cover. Marina arrived with coffee and pastries, playing the thoughtful girlfriend perfectly. She immediately pulled Ethan aside to review expansion plans. Their heads bent together over his phone. They ignored grandmother completely as she stood in her own kitchen, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. I wanted to comfort her, but couldn't risk alerting Marina to my growing resistance. At the pharmacy later, picking up grandmother's medication, I ran into David Kim's mother. She collapsed against me in the aisle, sobbing about her son's injuries, shattered fingers that would never hold a violin properly again, broken ribs that made breathing agony. The doctors said he might walk without a limp eventually, but his music career was over. She didn't know who attacked him. The boys had worn masks, but I knew. The Wire had recorded Marina's proud description of the assault. Rick, the pharmacist who'd gone to high school with my wife, pulled me aside after Mrs. Kim left. He glanced around nervously before admitting Ethan had tried to forge prescriptions last month. Sophisticated forgeries, almost perfect. Rick hadn't reported it out of respect for my wife's memory, but he was worried. The corruption was spreading through our community. Loyalty to the dead, protecting the guilty. I drove to my office to retrieve security footage, backup drives, hoping to preserve evidence Marina didn't know existed, but my key card wouldn't work. The security guard, someone I'd worked alongside for 5 years, explained apologetically that Marina had called about safety concerns. She'd had my access revoked, claiming I'd been acting erratically. My own workplace had become enemy territory. In the parking garage, I discovered my assigned spot now belonged to someone else. Security mentioned Marina had filed formal concerns about my mental state, suggesting I might be a danger to myself or others. The isolation was systematic, cutting me off from resources, allies, evidence. She thought of everything. I met Tom at the hospital during his lunch break, showing him the wire in a supply closet. He listened to portions of Marina's confession with growing horror before revealing his own discovery. He'd found substances hidden in grandmother's garage, not just pills, but harder substances. Our elderly mother had become an unwitting substance warehouse. Tom mentioned seeing Marina in the pediatric ward recently, chatting with vulnerable families. Nothing illegal about visiting sick children, but the pattern disturbed him. She was always hunting, always grooming, always expanding her network. Sarah's mother intercepted me in the hospital parking lot. Sarah was awake and remembering details about the pills. She recalled Ethan's sales pitch about managing stress, staying competitive, maintaining perfect grades. He'd seemed so understanding, so helpful. Just a fellow student offering study aids. The pills had been professionally packaged, impossible to distinguish from legitimate prescriptions. I met Janet, my wife's best friend and our family lawyer, at a small cafe downtown. She looked uncomfortable before I even sat down. Marina had already consulted her about custody concerns, claiming I was unstable, potentially abusive. She'd asked detailed questions about my finances, my mental health history, my wife's death. Janet couldn't share specifics due to confidentiality, but her warning was clear. Marina was building a case. At the grocery store, I overheard two soccer moms discussing their son's sudden wealth, new shoes, new phones, new confidence. They'd started working for Ethan, though the mothers didn't know what that meant. They seemed proud their boys were showing entrepreneurial spirit. I wanted to warn them, but knew they'd never believe me. Not with Marina's campaign painting me as the unstable father who couldn't accept his son's independence. Marina's text arrived while I was still processing the mother's conversation. The attached photos showed intimate moments from our early dating. Her hand on my chest, my lips against her neck. The message threatened to show Ethan these images with fabricated timestamps, making it appear I'd started dating immediately after his mother died. My hands shook as I deleted the message, knowing she'd already backed up everything. That evening, I noticed my wife's journal missing from the nightstand drawer where I'd kept it since her death. Marina referenced passages from it during dinner, twisting my wife's words about protecting Ethan into justification for her methods. She described how my wife had worried about my softness, my inability to prepare Ethan for harsh realities. Every quote was accurate but stripped of context, weaponized against the very values my wife had cherished. Mrs. Chin caught me the following morning while I retrieved mail. Her weathered hands trembled as she produced a small USB drive. Her grandson had installed security cameras after recent break-ins, and they'd captured the night David Kim was attacked. The footage showed everything. Marina's car arriving first, Ethan and his crew gathering, the methodical assault. My elderly neighbor had been too frightened to approach police directly, but trusted me with the evidence. My boss summoned me to his office that afternoon. Marina had called expressing concerns about my drinking, claiming she'd smelled alcohol on my breath during morning drop-offs. He mentioned productivity concerns, suggested I take some personal time. The accusation was completely fabricated, but defending myself would sound exactly like what an alcoholic would say. I accepted the warning silently, recognizing another chess piece being moved. Brad from IT approached me in the parking lot after work. He noticed unusual activity on my work computer. Someone had been accessing client files remotely using my credentials. The digital footprints led back to Marina's IP address. She'd been downloading financial data, presumably searching for vulnerabilities or building her custody case. Brad offered to document everything quietly, understanding the delicate situation. Marina's whisper campaign intensified over the following days. She approached neighbors during her morning runs, expressing worry about my mental state. She mentioned finding empty bottles, hearing me talking to myself, seeing me cry randomly. Each conversation planted seeds of doubt, building a narrative of instability. Several neighbors began avoiding eye contact when I passed. Tom's wife, Grace, called me privately after Marina approached her at yoga class. Marina had asked probing questions about our family's medical history, specifically about genetic predispositions to violence or mental illness. She'd framed it as concern for Ethan's future, wanting to understand what he might have inherited. Grace recognized the manipulation, but played along, gathering information about Marina's tactics. While cleaning Ethan's room, I discovered loose floorboards near his closet. Underneath lay his old journal, entries dating back to when Marina first arrived. His handwriting documented her grooming process, how she'd identified his insecurities, exploited his grief, positioned herself as the parent who truly understood him. One entry particularly chilled me. Marina says, "Dad is weak, but I'm strong. She's teaching me to take what I deserve." Amy, a paralegal at a downtown firm, recognized me at the dog park and approached cautiously. She'd worked at Marina's previous company and remembered when Marina left suddenly. There had been complaints about inappropriate conduct with a teenage intern, but no formal charges were filed. The company had quietly terminated her with a separation agreement. Amy provided the firm's name, suggesting I investigate further. Marina served my wife's anniversary dinner that night, the exact meal my wife had prepared for our 5th anniversary, using her grandmother's china I'd packed away. She'd found the recipe card, the dishes, even replicated the table setting from old photos. She washed my face throughout the meal, savoring my pain while maintaining innocent conversation about her day. The psychological torture was precise, calculated. The bank called about suspicious activity on Ethan's account. Someone had attempted to open credit lines in his name, applications that would require both parents' consent to investigate fully. Marina had been building financial entanglements, creating complications that would make any custody battle messier. I could only note the attempts, unable to act without her cooperation. The confrontation at the restaurant happened publicly, deliberately. Sarah's father approached our table during what Marina had staged as a family dinner. His daughter remained hospitalized, liver damage potentially permanent. He demanded answers about the pills, about Ethan's role. Other diners turned to watch. Ethan smirked throughout the accusation while Marina performed shock and sympathy. She gripped my hand under the table, nails digging in, ensuring I stayed silent. Ethan's first direct communication came that night. A text calling me pathetic, saying his mother would be ashamed of my weakness. Marina had given him a phone I didn't know about. His words echoed her phrasing perfectly. He said she was more family than I'd ever been, that she understood strength while I wallowed in sentiment. The message ended with a threat to disappear if I continued interfering. Marina made her offer the next morning. She'd ensure Ethan stayed out of serious trouble if I signed over custody. She implied having evidence of abuse, twisted interpretations of normal parental discipline, manufactured incidents. Her presentation was professional, almost corporate. She'd prepared documents, had everything ready. I stalled, claiming I needed time to consider. Ben, the church youth pastor, called about concerning behavior. Ethan had been recruiting younger kids from youth group, introducing them to his crew. Parents trusted Marina, who'd started volunteering for church events. She positioned herself perfectly, the concerned stepmother trying to provide stability while I struggled with obvious mental health issues. Ben wanted to believe me, but needed concrete evidence. I began documenting Marina's passwords, watching her type when she thought I was distracted. Her arrogance made her careless. She used variations of the same base phrase. I memorized patterns, noted which accounts used which versions. The information felt like ammunition I wasn't yet sure how to use. Support for Marina dwindled to 3 families, all with sons profiting from Ethan's operation. Their boys drove new cars, wore expensive clothes, flashed cash at school. The parents willfully ignored obvious signs, choosing prosperity over truth. They formed Marina's core defense, vouching for her character whenever questions arose. Mrs. Chin's footage proved even more valuable when enhanced. Her grandson's analysis clearly showed Marina's car present during David's assault, contradicting her alibi of being at a work function. The timestamp was irrefutable. The elderly woman's courage in sharing this evidence gave me hope that truth might eventually prevail. Tom lost his promotion after Marina suggested to hospital administrators that he might be stealing medications. She'd made the accusation subtly during a charity event, expressing concern about family addiction issues. The investigation found nothing, but the suspicion was enough. Tom refused to abandon me despite the cost to his career, his loyalty unwavering. Grace organized secret meetings in her basement for affected parents. The gatherings started small. 3 mothers whose sons had been approached by Ethan's crew. They shared information Marina didn't know they were exchanging. Each meeting revealed new patterns, more victims, deeper manipulation. The network grew quietly, parents protecting each other's children. When alone in Marina's car, while she grabbed coffee, I found hidden recording devices tucked under seats. Instead of removing them, I photographed their positions. She'd been recording conversations, building her own evidence cache. I left everything untouched, but began speaking more carefully in vehicles. The confrontation at school pickup was unplanned. I mentioned her previous job termination, watching her mask slip momentarily. Parents nearby overheard. She recovered quickly, laughing about disgruntled former colleagues. But damage was done. Seeds of doubt were planted. She threatened my job again in the parking lot, but her voice shook slightly. Tom's security friend provided crucial footage from mall cameras. Marina met with teenage boys at the food court, passing small packages hand to hand. The implications were clear, even if the contents weren't visible. The security officer couldn't officially act, but made copies available. Evidence accumulated slowly, building toward critical mass. 2 families pulled their sons from Ethan's crew after I shared evidence privately. They'd noticed personality changes, missing money, new attitudes. The photographs and footage confirmed their worst fears. They acted quietly to avoid Marina's retaliation, but began warning other parents. The network of resistance grew organically. Ms. Rodriguez, the school counselor, had been documenting everything. She showed me careful notes about Ethan's behavioral changes, Marina's suspicious involvement, the crew's impact on other students. Official channels required more proof, but but she built a comprehensive file. Her professional opinion would carry weight when the time came. I liquidated inherited bonds to hire a private investigator using cash transactions Marina couldn't track. The investigator specialized in background checks, particularly interested in patterns across multiple jobs. His initial findings confirmed Amy's information. Marina had left 3 positions under suspicious circumstances, always involving inappropriate relationships with younger employees or their children. Marina's lunch surprise at my office was pure theater. She arrived with food, loudly discussing my mental health struggles in the lobby. Coworkers heard about my drinking problem, my depression, my inability to cope with single parenthood. She painted herself as the devoted girlfriend trying to hold our family together. The performance was flawless, my protests seeming like denial. Sarah's mother found me after Marina's show, apologizing for believing the lies. 2 other parents joined her, realizing how Marina had manipulated their perceptions. They'd compared notes, recognized the patterns. Their apologies meant less than their promise to support truth when needed. The tide was turning, slowly. Marina's cybersecurity company launched an internal investigation after an anonymous tip about data theft. Her access to sensitive systems was restricted pending review. She couldn't prove my involvement, but knew I was responsible. The professional consequences were beginning to manifest. Her carefully constructed life showing cracks. The private investigator uncovered more disturbing patterns. Marina had been questioned in connection with vandalism at a previous job, threatening messages left for a supervisor who'd rejected her advances. She'd talked her way out of charges, but the pattern was clear: manipulation, escalation, and expertise at avoiding consequences. I warned Jeremy directly about Marina's grooming, providing Ms. Rodriguez's contact information. The boy listened with widening eyes as I described the patterns, the techniques, the gradual corruption. He'd already noticed her special attention, the private conversations, the subtle suggestions about his potential. My warning came just in time. 7 families formed an unofficial alliance, creating a rotation to monitor Ethan's crew movements. Parents took turns watching known dealing spots, warning potential targets, documenting activities. The grassroots surveillance network operated through encrypted messaging, sharing real-time information Marina couldn't intercept. Marina's attempt to seduce my boss failed spectacularly when his wife arrived unexpectedly. She'd been giving a presentation in his office, door locked, blouse strategically unbuttoned. His wife's entrance destroyed any credibility Marina had built. The story spread through the office within hours, my supposed instability suddenly seeming less certain. Grandmother finally saw the truth when she caught Marina teaching Ethan to exploit her heart condition. Marina demonstrated how to trigger anxiety attacks, how to make her chest pains worse, how to use medical emergencies for manipulation. My mother's horror at realizing she'd been harboring a monster was profound. She agreed to speak out despite her fear. The local coffee shop banned Marina after several parents shared concerns. The owner, a grandmother herself, recognized predatory behavior. Other small businesses followed suit: the dry cleaner, the gym, the bookstore. The community began closing ranks, protecting itself from the infection Marina represented. Employment records obtained by the investigator showed Marina's pattern clearly: 5 jobs in 7 years, each ending after complaints about inappropriate behavior. The documentation was damning. She perfected her technique over time, learning to avoid formal charges while maximizing damage. Ethan was just her latest project. Marina's emergency custody filing triggered immediate response from our support network. 12 families provided character statements about my parenting, documented Marina's manipulation, shared their own experiences. The filing was exposed as baseless within days. Her legal maneuvering backfiring spectacularly. Marcus, Ethan's former best friend, finally broke his silence. Marina had approached him first, made subtle advances, tested his vulnerability. When he proved too stable, too well-supported, she'd shifted focus to Ethan. The revelation explained why their friendship had ended so abruptly. Marcus carried guilt about not warning anyone sooner. The choice between exposing Marina immediately or gathering more evidence tortured me. Each day meant more victims, more corruption, more damage to Ethan, but premature action might let her escape consequences again. I chose patience, building an airtight case while watching my son sink deeper into darkness. The basketball game showcased Ethan's complete transformation. He extorted money from younger students openly, Marina cheering what she called his business acumen. Teachers watched helplessly, unable to intervene without concrete proof. The principal and 3 teachers approached me privately afterward, sharing documentation they'd been compiling independently. Marina's custody law notes, discovered in her car during routine maintenance, revealed her timeline. She planned everything months in advance, The corruption of Ethan, the destruction of my credibility, the legal maneuvering. The documents showed careful study of precedents, strategies for painting me as unfit. Her preparation was meticulous. Mrs. Chun organized a neighborhood watch specifically around grandmother's house after documenting substance deals. Elderly residents who'd lived there for decades began patrolling, noting license plates, photographing visitors. Their courage in standing against teenage dealers inspired others. The community protection network strengthened daily. Marina's retaliation was swift. She sent Ethan to threaten Mrs. Chun, but the elderly woman's grandson, home from college, intervened. He recorded the entire interaction. Ethan describing what would happen to her property, her pets, her safety if she continued interfering. The recording became crucial leverage. With video evidence of threats, I finally had power. Marina had to back off the neighbors or risk the recording going viral. She understood immediately. Her careful reputation management couldn't survive footage of Ethan threatening an elderly woman on her behalf. The first crack in her control appeared. Marina's termination from the cybersecurity firm came with satisfying swiftness. Data theft evidence was irrefutable, her access patterns clearly showing unauthorized downloads. She blamed me, but couldn't prove involvement. Professional consequences were manifesting rapidly. Her power base was eroding. The support group expanded to 12 families, creating phone trees for rapid communication. When Ethan's crew appeared at the mall or near schools, warnings spread within minutes. Parents protected each other's children, sharing information Marina couldn't control. The community defense network proved more powerful than her manipulation. David's father, whom I'd known peripherally through work, became an unexpected ally. His son's injuries had opened his eyes to the danger Marina represented. His professional connections and resources strengthened our alliance significantly. Together, we compiled evidence from multiple sources, building an undeniable case. The evidence file grew thick with photographs, videos, documents, witness statements. Each piece was carefully verified, cross-referenced, backed up in multiple locations. We prepared for Marina's counterattacks, her attempts to discredit or destroy evidence. The citizen investigation was more thorough than any official inquiry. Marina's emergency custody filing collapsed when confronted with community support. Her accusations of abuse, instability, and neglect were systematically refuted by neighbors, teachers, and family friends. The judge's dismissal was swift and harsh. Marina's legal strategy had failed completely. Grandmother's decision to testify came after Grace spent 3 hours holding her hand in the living room. My mother's fingers trembled as she signed the statement documenting the garage substances and manipulation tactics. Grace's gentle persistence had broken through decades of shame about the heart medication dependency. The elderly woman's courage rippled through our support network immediately. That evening, a local detective who'd gone to school with my wife reached out through Tom. He couldn't launch an official investigation yet, but wanted to review our evidence privately. We met at Tom's house, spreading documents across his dining table. The detective's expression darkened as he examined Mrs. Chen's footage, the employment records, the witness statements. He advised us to prepare for Marina's escalation once she realized the walls were closing in. I compiled the complete evidence package with help from our 12-family alliance. David's father contributed professional quality organization, creating index sections for each pattern of abuse. We made multiple copies, storing them with trusted community members. The file contained everything: photographs, videos, financial records, witness statements from 23 individuals. Each piece cross-referenced and verified. Community leaders at the church, the school board, and local business association received copies during a carefully coordinated meeting. They reviewed the material silently, faces growing increasingly grim. The coffee shop owner spoke first, confirming Marina's ban would extend to all affiliated businesses. The school board president promised increased monitoring of Ethan's crew activities. The church elder announced Marina's immediate removal from all volunteer positions. Marina's response came through social media within hours. She and Ethan launched a coordinated campaign painting me as an abusive father trying to control his independent son. They posted edited videos making normal parental discipline look harsh, twisted context to suggest mental instability. Ethan's posts accused me of jealousy over his success, claiming I couldn't handle him surpassing me. The cyber harassment began that night. My personal information appeared on multiple forums with false accusations attached. Strangers called my phone with threats, sent explicit images, ordered pizzas to grandmother's house at 3 a.m. Ethan had weaponized his online connections, turning anonymous trolls into tools of torment. 3 families withdrew from our alliance after similar treatment, protecting their own children from the digital onslaught. I changed phone numbers, locked down social media, installed new security cameras. But the isolation felt crushing as families distanced themselves from the controversy. Marina had successfully made supporting me feel dangerous. I spent sleepless nights deleting threats, blocking numbers, wondering if I'd lost my son forever. Despite everything, I chose to focus on saving Ethan rather than just destroying Marina. The evidence could ruin her completely. But public exposure would also cement Ethan's criminal reputation. I needed a strategy that separated him from her influence without destroying his future entirely. The decision meant accepting continued harassment while seeking a more nuanced solution. Marina interpreted my restraint as weakness, accelerating her plans. She enrolled Ethan in an alternative school known for troubled teens with money. Expanding his network of potential dealers, she introduced him to suppliers beyond our small community, teaching him to launder money through cryptocurrency. Her lessons grew darker, focusing on psychological manipulation of authority figures. The planned intervention required delicate coordination. Grace organized a gathering at grandmother's house, inviting key witnesses and community supporters. We chose Sunday afternoon, when Marina typically attended her gym class. 15 people assembled in grandmother's living room. Parents, teachers, the detective, community leaders. Everyone understood the stakes. Marina arrived 20 minutes early, having skipped her class. She entered playing the concerned girlfriend, carrying flowers for grandmother. Her smile faltered seeing the assembled group. She immediately shifted tactics, expressing worry about my paranoid delusions that had apparently infected others. Her performance might have worked months ago, but too many people had seen behind her mask. I presented the wire recording to the room, letting Marina's own words fill the space. Her confession about grooming techniques, targeting vulnerable families, transforming Ethan into a weapon. Several parents gasped hearing her describe their children as potential projects. Marina's face remained composed, but her hands clenched rhythmically. She revealed her own recordings, edited conversations suggesting abuse, manipulated audio painting me as unstable, but her edited versions couldn't overcome the full context our group possessed. When she claimed I'd forced her into everything, Mrs. Chin's grandson stood up with his laptop, showing the unedited footage of Ethan threatening his grandmother. Other neighbors confirmed similar intimidation attempts. Marina tried to flee when she realized her narrative had collapsed. Community members blocked the exits, maintaining careful distance to avoid assault charges. The detective explained that while he couldn't arrest her yet, leaving would trigger immediate investigation. She stood trapped in grandmother's living room, surrounded by people who'd seen through her carefully constructed image. Multiple witnesses began sharing their experiences. Jeremy described her grooming attempts at youth group. Marcus explained why he'd ended his friendship with Ethan after Marina's advances. Sarah's mother detailed the overdose that nearly killed her daughter. Each testimony stripped away another layer of Marina's fabricated innocence. The accumulated evidence made denial impossible. Marina's cybersecurity termination, her pattern across multiple jobs, the community documentation, everything pointed to systematic predatory behavior. Even the three families who'd supported her began reconsidering their son's involvement in substance dealing, suddenly undeniable. Ethan watched the presentation from the kitchen doorway, his expression shifting from smirk to confusion to something harder to read. When the wire recording played, Marina calling me pathetically malleable, his hands started trembling. He heard her describe him as a project, a weapon she was crafting. The revelation that Marcus had been her first target, that his lost friendship resulted from Marina's manipulation, visibly shook him. I made the crucial decision to play Marina's full confession rather than protecting Ethan from the worst details. He needed to understand how thoroughly she'd manipulated him, how calculated every interaction had been. The community agreed to support his rehabilitation rather than pursuing charges if he cooperated. It was mercy at tremendous cost. David Kim's injuries remained. Sarah's liver damage was permanent. Marina's final manipulation attempt came as tears and accusations. She claimed I'd orchestrated everything, that the community had fallen for an elaborate frame-up, but her isolation was complete. Without her job, without community support, without access to Ethan's network, she had no leverage left. The detective informed her that leaving town immediately would prevent formal charges, but any contact with minors would trigger prosecution. She left grandmother's house under community surveillance, multiple cars following to ensure she actually departed. Her influence over Ethan had shattered through collective action and documented truth. The network she'd built collapsed without her constant manipulation to maintain it. Ethan's first words to me came as everyone dispersed. He mentioned remembering his mother's pancakes, the quiet Saturday mornings before Marina arrived. It wasn't an apology or a dramatic reconciliation, just acknowledgement that life existed before her influence, that somewhere beneath the corruption, fragments of his former self might remain. The support group transformed over the following weeks into a permanent community program. Parents established monitoring systems for vulnerable youth, created educational materials about grooming tactics, developed protocols for early intervention. The infrastructure Marina had exploited became a defense network against future predators. I burned the wire recording device in grandmother's backyard, choosing forward progress over dwelling on betrayal. The evidence had served its purpose. Marina was gone, her network dismantled, her influence broken. Keeping trophies of the trauma would only anchor us to that darkness. 6 months later, I watched from my car as Ethan entered the animal shelter for his first volunteer shift since Marina's arrival. He moved hesitantly. No longer the confident boy who'd once cradled injured birds, the shelter director had agreed to give him a chance. Understanding redemption required opportunity. Other volunteers kept their distance. Trust required time to rebuild. His hands shook slightly as he filled water bowls. The same hands that had broken David Kim's fingers. He worked silently, avoiding eye contact with anyone. But he showed up the next Saturday, and the next. Small acts of consistency, slowly establishing new patterns. The transformation Marina had orchestrated couldn't be quickly undone, but tiny choices accumulated towards something better. Our relationship remained tentative, built on careful interactions and maintained boundaries. Trust had been shattered too thoroughly for easy repair. We ate dinner together twice a week. Conversation limited to safe topics. Progress came in microscopic increments. A genuine laugh at one of my terrible jokes, an unsolicited question about his grandmother's health, a moment of eye contact that didn't immediately shift away. Marina's shadow lingered in unexpected ways. Ethan still flinched when female authority figures approached. He struggled with genuine emotional connections, defaulting to manipulation before catching himself. Years of twisted lessons couldn't be erased through good intentions alone. Recovery would be a lifetime project. The community's vigilance never fully relaxed. Parents remained alert to grooming signs. Teachers documented behavioral changes. Neighbors watched for predatory patterns. Marina had taught us all a brutal lesson about evil wearing familiar faces, targeting our deepest vulnerabilities. That education came at tremendous cost, but created a more protected environment for future children. David Kim never played violin again. Sarah managed her liver condition with daily medication. Grandmother required anxiety treatment after months of exploitation. The damage couldn't be undone, only managed and learned from. Justice came through community action rather than legal consequences, an imperfect resolution that reflected real-world complexity. I returned to work gradually, rebuilding professional relationships Marina had poisoned. Colleagues who'd believed her lies about my instability witnessed my consistent presence, my steady performance. My reputation recovered slowly through demonstrated reliability rather than dramatic vindication. The investigation into Marina's past revealed 2 other communities with similar patterns. Vulnerable teenagers corrupted, families destroyed, predators vanishing before consequences materialized. We shared our documentation with those groups, helping them understand what they'd experienced. The network of awareness expanded beyond our small town. Ethan aged into adulthood carrying invisible scars. He maintained his volunteer work, attended community college, avoided relationships that might reveal his capacity for cruelty. Marina had awakened something dark within him that required constant vigilance to contain. He chose isolation over risking harm to others, a lonely penance for crimes committed under her influence. Our story never made headlines or inspired legislation. No dramatic trial provided closure. Marina simply vanished into another identity, another community, another hunting ground. But our neighborhood had learned to protect itself, to recognize predators despite their careful camouflage. That knowledge passed between generations, a quiet defense against those who would corrupt our children. I still wake some nights remembering the wire against my chest. Marina's breath on my ear as she detailed her plans. The memory serves as a reminder that evil rarely announces itself. Instead, it arrives with gentle touches and understanding smiles. My son survived her influence, but emerged forever changed. We both did. Recovery meant accepting that damage while building something functional from the ruins. Not redemption exactly, but continuous effort toward being better than what she'd tried to make us. The animal shelter became Ethan's anchor, volunteering evolving into part-time employment. He found purpose in caring for abandoned creatures, perhaps recognizing himself in their wary eyes. We developed a ritual of coffee after his Saturday shifts. Conversation careful but consistent. 2 damaged people slowly learning to trust the bridge between them, built one plank at a time across a chasm that would never fully close.